We will wait some participants to join for 2-3 minutes, then we will start. है बेटा? देखो जरा कोई participants आ गए हैं students या नहीं? हैं डॉक्टर सोनी?
हाँ जी हाँ जी
2-4 मिनट वेट कर लेते हैं, कुछ स्टूडेंट्स और ज्वाइन कर लें।
हाँ हाँ श्योर श्योर।
पहले वो ठीक करेंगे, अगली बार सैटरडे से कर देंगे ना, संडे को थोड़े काम वो फ्री होते हैं लोग।
हाँ नहीं ठीक है। अच्छा वो तुझे भेजता सी कल फिर?
ਆਪਾਂ ਲਾਈਵ ਆ ਹਜੇ, ਆਪਾਂ ਲਾਈਵ ਆ।
अच्छा अच्छा अच्छा
आए कुछ और कर दें शुरू। पार्ट की है तो 2 मिनट में शुरू कर दें। वो डॉक्टर कोहाड़ मान गए हैं लेक्चर देने को।
अच्छा
कोई बात नहीं, न्यू एजुकेशन पॉलिसी पे नेक्स्ट संडे प्लान करेंगे। दिस इज एन अनाउंसमेंट आल्सो टू ऑल। We might, we are Dr. Kohad, we are trying to pursue Dr. Kohad, Vice Chancellor from Central University, Haryana, to give a lecture on new education policy. So tentatively he has said yes, he will see his schedule. If he agrees, then that will be a great lecture, I think.
yes sure sure yes.
Oh, so we will start, I think. So
Yeah.
I think we can start right now. We are into the 6th lecture of our weekend series. I'm happy that we are a very big number of people are following us on this lecture. I invite Professor S.K. Soni, the Vice President of AMI Chandigarh Unit and a Senior Professor in Department of Microbiology, Punjab University, to welcome Dr. Kanti and all other who have joined us. Dr. Soni, please.
Good morning to all of you. So on behalf of AMI Chandigarh Unit and Department of Microbiology at Punjab University Chandigarh, I welcome Dr. Kanti Kiran, Senior Scientist at NABI Mohali, Dr. Naveen Gupta, the General Secretary of AMI Chandigarh Unit, and all the participants who have joined online for today's lecture. So I now invite Dr. Naveen Gupta to introduce the speaker before the participants. Dr. Naveen, please.
So, thank you, Dr. Soni. So once again, I welcome all. Today, as you know that in this series, we are having young scientists also to give lectures. So today we have a young scientist doing very good work from a comparatively young institute. So we have with us Dr. Kanti Kiran Kondipudi from National Institute of Agri-Food Biotechnology Research Institute, NABI, Mohali. Now, Dr. Kanti Kiran is presently working as a Scientist E at Food and Nutritional Biotechnology Division of NABI Mohali, and he is heading the Healthy Gut Research Group at NABI. Dr. Kanti obtained his PhD in Applied Microbiology Biotechnology from Indian Institute of Technology, Chennai, that it is IITM, India. Subsequently, Dr. Kanti was a postdoctoral fellow at Department of Laboratory Medicine, Division of Medical Microbiology, Lund University, Sweden. Dr. Kondipudi's research includes developing functional foods and ingredients to prevent metabolic disorders, major emphasis on protecting the intestinal barrier function, gut inflammation, gut microbiota, and metabolites. His research credentials are very clear from his number of publications. He has more than 50 publications in very high impact factor journals with I'm seeing his CV with a total impact of 150 and a very high H index and I index. Apart from publications, he has contributed to the international research community as he has delivered a number of lectures in international and national conferences and attended a large number of conferences. And he is not only doing academic research, his research is very much applicable, which is evident as he has two patents, one in US and one in India to his credit. Apart from that, he is deeply involved in academics. He has acted as examiner in number of PIDs, a number of students have completed PID under him, and a good number of students are doing PID with him. So, apart from all this, I know that Dr. Kanti is a very helping person. He is a good friend. And whenever we need any help, we can drop in his lab at NABI. So we are thankful for that also to Dr. Kanti. So any student who will need any help at Kanti, अगर कोई भी नाबी में उनकी हेल्प नहीं करता तो डॉक्टर कांति को फोन कर लो मेरे से फोन लेके. So Dr. Kanti, I have given you a responsibility today. So Dr. Kanti will be speaking today on nutraceutical for healthy living. This topic is especially important in today's scenario when we are talking about increasing and maintaining our immunity in the emergence of new infections like COVID and other diseases. So I welcome Dr. Kanti and I invite him to give his lecture on nutraceuticals for healthy living. Dr. Kanti, please.
Just a moment. Sir, are my slides seen? Are my slides seen, sir? So, very good morning to all of you. And I would like to thank first Dr. Naveen, who is my best collaborator from Punjab University Microbiology, for giving me this opportunity to share glimpses of what we are doing at our institute, National Agri-Food Biotechnology Institute, which is, as he mentioned, fairly a young institute in Mohali. Sir, am I seen?
You please continue, Dr. Kanti, it's okay.
Yeah. So the topic of today's my presentation is focused on nutraceuticals for healthy living. So without wasting much time, I will go into the contents of my lecture. So I will talk about a brief introduction about the malnutrition, where I discuss about undernutrition and overnutrition. What are nutraceuticals classifications and what are the various agencies that regulate these nutraceutical health claims? And what we do research at NABI, National Agri-Food Biotechnology Institute, and I will conclude my presentation. So as we all know, India, before independence, we used to face a lot of food scarcity. And post-independence, because of Green Revolution and high throughput science and technological efforts, now we have reached food security. That means we have sufficient food. So if you see the population-wise, we are the second populated country, where 17.8% constituted by the total population of the world, and we are expected to be more populous by 2022. And as I mentioned that we are self-sufficient in the grain production with 1.9% productivity during 2014. However, there are alarming factors like we are in the food security index, although we rank 75, but in the global hunger index, we have the score of 29, which makes that people are still suffering from nutrition deficiency. The reasons being the poor quality of protein consumption. If you see 38.6 vis-a-vis the world average of 57.8, And poor availability of the micronutrients from the food, 26.5 versus world average 57.3. And because of westernization in the modern era, we have lessened the diet diversification. So 41 versus 51.6 when compared with the overall world. And because of this, we have annual GDP losses due to undernutrition, around 11% in Asia and Africa. So we are facing now, the country is facing a double nutrition burden. As I mentioned, undernutrition, since many ages we have been reeling with this problem. And recently we are also facing the problem of overnutrition. So developing countries like India, Mexico, Brazil, etc., where these are the hotspots for the double nutritional burdens because of high incidences of obesity, overweight population, and also we have hidden hunger, and the efforts were giving limited success in order to remove the malnutrition. So the nutritional security, which is the need of the hour. So if you see undernutrition, 62 million children under 5 were stunted in India, and because of the micronutrient deficiency, where you see there is a wasting, weight measured by weight or weight to height ratio, there is a stunting, short heights, and we have protein deficiency, which might be responsible for low birth of less than 2.5 kilograms weight. And among other micronutrient deficiencies, we have a serious deficiency of vitamin B12, because most of the vitamin B12 is originated from animal-based foods, and we have more vegetarian population. So as a result, it leads to many kind of diseases like depression, hypothyroidism, infertility, cognitive decline, etc. And the most perilous problem is the anemia. India is one of the countries in the world that has the highest prevalence of anemia. So if you see Indian women, 56% of the women are deficient in iron, pregnant women 58%, and children 79%, and adolescent girls of 56% are having anemia. So on the other side, the causes of the undernutrition are multifold. Some are the basic causes like formal and non-formal institutions, political and ideological superstructure, economic structure. The others are like inadequate access to food. Even though we have food security, but access to the food is limited. Everyone cannot get the food. That might be one of the reason. And inadequate care for mothers and children during the time of pregnancy and later, and insufficient health services and unhealthy environment, which all might be contributing for these malnutrition related problems. On the other side, now as I said, there is an overnutrition related problems. And if you see, India ranks among the top 10 obese nations of the world. 11% of Indian population is obese, and if you see, alarmingly, 35 to 40% of urban people have unhealthy body shapes. That means they are overweight. And 1 out of every 10 urban Indian children is overweight. 45% males and 55% of females in Delhi are obese. So the institute where we are located in Punjab is considered as the heaviest state according to National Family Health Survey 4, where more female people are obese and overweight compared to males, although the incidences of obesity is very high in Punjab, maybe because of the dietary patterns and habits in this region. So what are the contributing factors? One, the fast development in the technology industry. The other side, irrational use of pesticides, heavy metals, and agriculture tools, leading to environmental pollution with increasing civilization. And the most important is the genetics, of course, and lifestyle changes. So genetics and lifestyle changes are all affected by your environmental factors. As a result, there is a higher risk for diseases like cancer, diabetes, respiratory illnesses, cardiovascular, and metabolic disorders such as obesity. So in India, we have coexistence of undernutrition as well as overnutrition, which is among the community and the household. And children under 5 who are overweight is approaching the number who suffering from wasting and overweight children under 5. So these problems are increasing at an alarming rate. So if we do not take care of this problem in future, it will be a great impact. It will cause a negative impact on the country's growth, because you need to put more cost on healthcare. So having said that, there are different methods to treat these both problems, undernutrition as well as overnutrition. When we take undernutrition, there are iron supplements are available, micronutrient supplements are available, but there is a limited success. So the reason being, the host physiology also plays an important role. Likewise, obesity, overweight, diabetes, etc. can also be tackled by medications, but medications pose a negative impact on the development, because most of these obesity medications profoundly influence the central metabolic process, that is endocrine system as well as the brain. So the negative effects of these therapeutics outweigh the beneficial effects. So there is a proverb which commonly people know, that prevention is always better than cure, and no therapeutics can be used for prevention, and diet makes an important role. So here the picture comes about the nutraceuticals. According to the American Association of Nutraceutical Chemists, nutraceutical is defined as a combination of nutrition and pharmaceutics, which is coined by Stephen D. Felice, who is the founder and chairman of the Foundation of Innovation in Medicine. And the other terms used for these nutraceuticals are the dietary supplements. So a product isolated or purified from the foods and generally sold in medical forms, not usually associated with the food, and demonstrated to have a physiological benefit or provide protection against chronic disease. This is the generally approved nutraceutical definition. So that means it must be isolated in a pure form from either plants or animals, and it can also be sold in a medical form, medicinal forms. So when we say nutraceutical, so there is always a confusion, since these are from plants as well as from animal sources, and they are from the food sources. Can these be called as functional foods? So there, how do we differentiate between the nutraceutical and functional food? So on the left side of the table, you see the nutraceutical. They must be in a concentrated bioactive forms of the ingredients. Unlike conventional foods like functional foods, these are the whole foods. While these nutraceuticals can be supplemented or added to the diet, whereas functional foods can be consumed as diets and enhance health in dosages that exceed those that could be obtained from the normal food. So when you take in sufficient or prescribed forms, nutraceuticals will provide a proven health benefit. While functional food, it also does a function, but it is beyond the normal food function. And nutraceuticals are intended to affect the structure and function of the body. Foods are not intended to affect the structure, whereas functional foods are generally for the maintenance of the general health of the body. So these nutraceuticals can be in the form of either pills, extracts, or tablets, while functional foods one has to consume in form of the food. There is no amount defined when we say that we have to eat in the form of a food. While nutraceutical, there is a specific dosage forms and a form where you can take in either tablets, pills, extracts, etc. So coming to the classification of the nutraceuticals, based on the food source, they are classified either plant originated, animal originated, or microbes originated. And in the plants, there are so many varieties of nutraceuticals. For example, dietary fibers like beta-glucans, antioxidants like ascorbic acid, and lycopene, capsaicin, and so on and so forth. While animals, basically they are vitamin B12, and some of them are conjugated fatty acids like conjugated linoleic acids, and polyunsaturated fatty acids like icosapentaenoic acid, etc. Coming to the microbes, microbial derivatives such as glucans, etc. can be accessed nutraceuticals, while whole microbes such as Saccharomyces, Lactobacillus, Bifidobacterium, etc. they can be consumed as nutraceutical. Coming to the phytochemicals are organic components that are present in the plant, especially in the cell walls of the plants, and they are referred to as phytonutrients. And unlike fat, vitamins, they are not essential for life. So, and they have these antioxidant action, hormonal action, stimulation of digestive enzymes, and they can interfere with the DNA replication and also pose antioxidant effects or antibacterial effects. And there is phytochemicals are called herbal nutraceuticals. They are refined forms of molecules from plants, for example, allicin from garlic, glycyrrhizin and liquidin from licorice, and curcumin from turmeric, so on and so forth. While plant extracts like tea extracts, bilberry, blackberry, blueberry extracts, and some polyphenols from certain plants can also be used as nutraceuticals. So classification of nutraceuticals based on the functionality, like what kind of biological function these molecules exert. They are anti-cancer molecules. They are like, for example, capsaicin from the chilies, genistein, conjugated linoleic acids, etc., curcumin. And some nutraceuticals can lower the blood glycerides, triglycerides, such as beta-glucan, gamma and delta tocotrienol, quercetins, pectins, etc. And most of the plant phenolics, they act as antioxidants, for example, ellagic acids, quercetin, tannins, catechins, etc. And many of them also act as anti-inflammatory as well as bone protective functions. Coming to the chemical nature, they are classified as carbohydrates. Basically, these carbohydrates, when I say they must be non-digestible carbohydrates, which are called as dietary fats, dietary fibers, which are polysaccharides consisting of many sugar molecules linked by the glycosidic bonds, or their hydrolytic products, which are called non-digestible oligosaccharides or prebiotics. So these carbohydrates, non-digestible carbohydrates, basically they stimulate the intestinal microbes that are present in the large bowel and in the small intestine. Similarly, there are phenols like flavonoids, tannins, anthocyanins, and whole microbes can be used, which are known as probiotics. In probiotics, there are conventional probiotics, which includes majorly lactic acid bacteria, such as lactobacillus, and lactic acid producing bacteria such as bifidobacterium, streptococcus, etc. And non-conventional microbes can be used as probiotics such as Akkermansia mucinifera, Faecalibacterium, Saccharomyces, so on and so forth. And in the lipids, because the lipids, we all know these are hydrophobic molecules, they are classified triglycerides, fatty acids, etc. But among the lipids, omega fatty acids plays an important role. And among the protein nutraceuticals, we have whey protein hydrolysates from the dairy, casein hydrolysates, and collagen hydrolysate, so on and so forth of the proteins like soy protein, pea protein, etc. can be used as nutraceuticals for various biological functions. Coming to the nutraceutical ingredients in the market size, you see here from 2017 to 2025. So the estimated from $152 billion to $228 billion market by the end of 2025. So you can see the major players in these nutraceuticals includes Asia Pacific, Europe, North America, and South America, and this is the rest of the world. Among the various segments within the nutraceutical industry, you can see here dietary fibers occupied the most prominent role. 22.5% of the market share is by dietary fibers, followed by micronutrients like vitamins, omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acids, while plant extracts 11.7% market hold it has. And among the minerals, minerals constitute about 9.9% of the global market value of the nutraceuticals, while probiotics, which constitutes 6.1% of the market value. So what is the crux is there is an ever increasing demand for these nutraceutical ingredients, and by the end of 2025 there will be a compound annual growth rate of 7% in the nutraceutical ingredient market. So this suggests that there is a tremendous demand for the nutraceuticals in the coming years. So in the dietary supplement market, this is the European dietary supplement market. If you see the breakdown, botanicals, vitamins, minerals, amino acids, enzymes, and other. So again, there is a 7.2% increase we will be able to see by the end of 2025 in this market supplement industry. So coming to the Indian nutraceutical market, India nutraceutical market is comparatively small and it holds 2.2% share of the global nutraceutical market. From 2017 to 2022, it is expected that we might achieve 21% of the CAGR. That means our market share is less in the nutraceutical. In the coming days, there is a large scope for this nutraceutical industry in our country. Indian nutraceutical market, you can see here, most of the Indian nutraceutical market is by 67%, major share is by the functional foods and beverages, while dietary supplement is 33%. So there are constraints in the Indian nutraceutical market. The drivers being, nowadays we have high throughput technologies, average increase in the income of the population, and most important is the consumer awareness concerning this nutraceuticals because of improving the health. But however, the restraints as well will be are there. Although there are now new guidelines in its place, but certain of the guidelines are still need to be adapted, and high product prices to recover because nutraceutical extraction from the raw materials needs a lot of economic inputs. So, and also there is no concrete initiatives in the form of subsidies for these nutraceutical markets. So there are constraints, there are drivers. So we have to propel forward in order to become a leader in this nutraceutical market. So one has to really optimize the processes and parameters to bring down the value of the cost of these extractions, so that we will have a high utility of these nutraceuticals in the Indian markets as well. So there are because science is involved, research is involved, at the same time there is a commercial interest as well. So wherever commercial activity is involved, there may be constraints like poor characterization of these or spurious products that are coming into the market. So in order to safeguard the consumers' rights and consumers' health point of view, all the countries are adopting certain laws for regulating the use and production of functional foods and the nutraceuticals. So for example, Canada, Sweden, and the United States FDA, European Union, for example, they have European Food Standards Authority like EFSA. They have very stringent regulatory guidelines for the nutraceuticals. And in FSSAI, Food Standards and Safety Authority of India, we too have very stringent guidelines for developing these nutraceutical products. So in the United States, the kinds of claims which are allowed are overseen and regulated, as I mentioned, by the Food and Drug Administration. It is like believed that 95% of the functional foods are not being clinically tested, but they are in the market. So such kind of hazards might be there because consumers might be easily fooled by these improper labelings, etc., so that they do not get what the benefit these nutraceuticals must be providing. So in order to safeguard all these things, certain laws by Food and Drug agencies and FSSAI in India are playing a pivotal role to regulate the sale of these nutraceuticals and functional foods. So coming to the health claims, the FDA allows certain health claims to be placed on the food as food labels. The most important is it should have the nutrient content claims, structure and function claims, and health claims, which is most important. So somebody designs a food and say this is anti-diabetic. So how do people know it is anti-diabetic? So it should be thoroughly investigated, and all the preclinical and clinical data against the claim should be documented, and it has to be presented to these food agencies so that they will go through and then they will approve the health claims. So nutrient content claims describe the content of the foods and can include words like free, low, and reduced. For example, low sodium, cholesterol free, etc. Such kind of labels are to be incorporated. So in India, as I mentioned, Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, 2018, they have notified in their gazette concerning the use or production of nutraceuticals and functional foods in India. Clause 5 of subsection 2 of section 92, when read with subsection 1 of section 22 of the Food Safety and Standards Act 2006. So according to that, there are 4 schedules which describes various nutraceuticals, what kind of claims have to be put on the labels, what kind of nutritional information we have to give, what are the approved nutraceuticals that are present that can be used in the Indian food nutraceutical or functional food industry have been given in this gazette. So according to them, according to the FSSAI, nutraceuticals must exert physiological benefit and maintain a good health. They must be extracted, isolated, and purified from food or non-food sources, prepared from amino acids, for example, their derivatives by bacterial fermentation under controlled condition, or they can be sold in the food format of granules, tablets, powders, capsules, jellies or gels, liquid, semi-solid, etc. And if you say nutraceutical, it can be packed in an ampule, sachet or bottle or in any other format as measured unit quantities, but not in formats that are meant for parenteral administration. So as I said, labeling is the most important feature of these functional foods, or especially of the nutraceuticals, and the label should not claim that certain nutraceutical XYZ prevents, treats or cure any human disease or refer to such properties. However, if the claim is substantiated by valid preclinical, clinical and safety data, then one can use the claims. And package of the food shall carry the word nutraceutical, and it should have the common name of the ingredient and quantity nutrient in percentage of the relevant recommended dietary elements by the ICMR need to be defined on the food label, and it should bear an advisory warning not to exceed the stated recommended daily usage. One has to define the recommended daily usage, and it should be labeled advisory warning for recommended usage, and it should mention not for medicinal use, prominently written, advisory warning in cases where there is any adversity of consumption like side effects, contradictions, etc. And a statement saying that it should be out of reach of children should always be there in the labels. So these are some of the very brief description of the various nutraceuticals, where are the world agencies in regulating the nutraceuticals or functional foods, and what are the labels, what labeling should be there on the functional food or a nutraceutical. But no matter how impressive is the labeling, label can be so attractive, but if it doesn't have proper nutritional facts on the label, it is worth not to go for it. Even a fortified junk foods which are labeled, which are fortified, are still a junk. So there is what is most important in the nutraceutical or functional food research is it should be an evidence-based research. So this should also include how much to eat in order to give a desired effect. That means the dosage is most important. Regarding the safety and toxicity and kinetics of the nutraceutical is very important. One has to determine if any novel ingredient they have discovered, so their safety, toxicity, and how it is distributed and cleared from the human body needs to be defined, and whether it is a synergistic effect or individual effect, that also needs to be defined. And any epigenetic changes these diets causes needs to be understood. And what is most important in order to provide an evidence-based research is the nutrigenomics, how these nutraceuticals influence the body parameters, body expression of the genes, tissue expression of the genes, etc. needs to be defined. And it is not like a magic bullet that one functional food or one nutraceutical plays an cures everything. So it has to be established for each and every class of the functional food or nutraceutical that is made. And whatever nutraceutical is made, it need not necessarily act or same for all the population. So in that way, a personalized nutrition plays an important role. One has to understand what nutraceutical causes what kind of changes in each person. That is what is called personalized nutrition. For example, a person might be having an ice cream, but his glycemic index is the blood glucose will not shoot. Second person, when he eats the same quantity of the ice cream under the same given conditions, his glucose levels might shoot like a hell. So this is how one has to understand at each individual level what kind of this impact these nutraceuticals or functional foods will cause. So that is why evidence-based research is very, very important. That will fetch you, and not only in the Indian market. Once we have a strong claims and evidence for the nutraceutical food, we can fetch even the international market. So with that, I will end that nutraceutical introduction part of that, and I will focus more on what we are doing at this National Agri-Food Biotechnology Institute, NABI. What is our research areas, what we are working. So the vision of our institute is prime importance is the nutritional security. Having food security, nutritional security, how secure or what kind of nutrients you have in the food that will give you health is what is most important. So that NABI is working in that area to improve the nutritional security for all through agri-food biotechnology research and innovation. Our mission is to be a center of excellence and provide leadership in agri-food biotechnology research institute. And our goal is, since we are a public funding institute, government funded institute, we need to improve the nutritional quality and availability of affordable agri-food and food products through innovations that will hugely benefit the population of our country. So our institute, this is our institute which is located in Mohali, and there are two divisions in the institute: agriculture biotechnology, food and nutrition biotechnology, and these are the various research programs that are ongoing in our institute. Malnutrition, agriculture biotechnology people are working on improving the mineral content in the plants by various conventional as well as modern molecular biological tools, crop improvement, anti-nutrient suppression, and the manipulation of the dietary constituents, for example, using nutraceuticals. How do we modulate the levels of hepcidin so that iron transport and iron bioavailability can be uptaken? We also use nanotechnological approaches in enhancing the micronutrient bioavailability and uptake from the host. And one part of the this is the undernutrition component, and in the overnutrition and obesity, my group is especially interested on how cereals and cereal bioactives play an important role in reducing the lifestyle disorders by manipulating the gut microbes. We use various probiotics, phytochemicals, and the gut. We also try to understand how these phytochemicals communicate with the gut and brain. So we use nutrigenomics, and we also develop formulations. And our overall goal is how do we best modulate the gut microbiota. So when we talk about modulation of the gut microbiota, this is a very brief introduction. I just want to bring to your all what is gut microbiota and how it is distributed. So if you look at the human beings, look, this is the image which shows you the overall human being. The entire body surface of the humans is covered by microbes, which we cannot see. Even internally, you see there is a lot of microbial population at various localities in the body. So we are a composite species, superorganism or second brain, which is constituted by the gut microbiota that is present in the small and the large intestine. And if you look at it, the microbial senses, the human cells number is outpassed by microbes, which are tenfold higher than the human cells. And in the humans, there are around 100 to 300 trillions of organisms are residing. So aggregate genomes of these species together is called as microbiome. And microbiome, since they are living in the intestine at such high amounts or such a high, huge population levels, they do perform various functions. So if you look at the percentage distribution of the microbes in the human body, if you see here in the human gastrointestinal tract, which is largely occupied by bacteroidetes and proteobacteria. Here you can see the largest population here in the intestine. And if you see internally, the distribution of the microbes here in the stomach, there is for example, in the oral cavity, there is a huge diversity of the bacteria that are present here, when you go down in the stomach, because of the extremely acidic pH, you have low diversity of the bacteria in the stomach. While when you go down in the duodenum, there is further higher concentration of the bacteria. In the intestine, small intestine, such as in the jejunum and ileum, you have 10^4 to 10% CFU per ml of the bacteria. But the most populated part in the human intestine is the large intestine, where you see around 10^11 to 10^12 CFU per ml of the bacteria. And this gut microbes is constituted of bacteria, bacteria, yeast, and then archaea, bacteriophages, etc. So having present in this large intestine in such a higher abundance, and since undigested food reaches into this large bowel, this microbial fermentation or microbial biorefinery in the gut generates various kinds of metabolites that influences the host health. So if you see in this picture, intestinal epithelial cells separates, this is the intestinal epithelial cells. This is the area where you have predominance or high abundance of the microflora present here, which is again in a way prevented from entering into the system by the presence of the mucus lining here, which acts as the first line of defense, so that bacterial harmful pathogens might not cross into this, and hence there is a protection from the harmful bacteria. At the same time, commensal bacteria communicates with these intestinal epithelial cells through various pattern recognition molecules, which are nuclear receptors, which are toll receptors, etc., which can signal this bacterial crosstalk, and then percolates the signal into the internal milieu and communicates with the various immune cells, Peyer's patches, and regulate the production of or immunoboosting as well as gut hormone secretion. So this gut microbiota, since they are in the large bowel, they receive large amounts of undigested food material left over after absorption, and that includes many dietary steroids, dietary proteins, dietary fats, dietary carbohydrates, etc., which are metabolized into short chain fatty acids, which are metabolized into secondary bile acids, and all these originate from the gut through microbial action, or communicated to the various organs such as adipose tissue, liver, and since from there they even in turn communicates with or migrates into other places like brain, heart, kidneys, so on and so forth. So the signaling molecules or the microbial metabolites generated from these food molecules, which communicate with the peripheral organs, and then they regulate the physiological functions of these organs. So the microbial metabolites that are produced include neurotransmitters, branched chain amino acids, short chain fatty acids, and metabolic products from the lipids, fats, and microbiota. Certain microbiota can produce vitamins, for example, vitamin B12, riboflavin, etc. And all these communicate with the various organs and plays an important role in improving the human health. So the earlier breakthrough studies came from Dr. Gordon's lab, who said that obesity influences the gut microbiota, or the gut microbial composition is altered because of obesity. So what the pioneering studies by Gordon and his group suggested, in obesity, the amount of firmicutes will increase and bacteroidetes will go down. So having said that, since then it has become a marker for leanness. Bacteroidetes ratio to the firmicutes should be high. That means more bacteroidetes and low firmicutes, the people will be lean. This is one of the biomarkers. Since then, due to this large number of high throughput technologies, microbial sequencing technologies like next generation sequencing and capillary sequencing technologies, a lot of studies have been dedicated to understand what is the role of microbiota not only in influencing obesity, but how it influences the whole body physiology. For example, human behavior, anxiety, depression, how it affects the brain, how it affects the cardiovascular system, how it affects the kidneys. It is a very, very active area of research. Since these nutraceuticals, for example, these dietary fibers, probiotics, they directly go into the gut. Therefore, gut microbial metabolism of prebiotics or dietary fibers or probiotics plays an important role. And there are a lot of efforts across the globe in order to are going on in order to understand how these dietary fibers and probiotics and various dietary nutraceuticals influence the gut microbiome. And hence, there is a lot of research that has been rejuvenated on these functional foods and nutraceuticals in order to understand how these influence the host metabolism. So after so many studies, it has been now confirmed that diet plays an important role in shaping the microbiota. The diets which are rich in easily absorbed sugars, refined sugars, for example, glucose, fructose, etc., and diets that are rich in fats, saturated fats, they change the gut microbiota composition towards more pathogenic side. That means more pathobionts will be present in the gut, which is called dysbiosis. So the restoration of the gut microbial balance towards the commensal bacteria is what is most important and which defines the health of the individual. So this is called eubiosis. So dysbiosis is loss in balance and eubiosis is the restoration of the commensal bacterial population to be more in number is what is known as eubiosis. So gut microbiota, when the composition of the gut microbiota is compromised, it leads to the microbial secretion of harmful metabolites. One of the majorly proven gut microbial metabolite is lipopolysaccharide, which is designated as LPS. This microbial lipopolysaccharide disturb the integrity of the epithelial cells and leads to the penetration through the tight junctions, and then these inflammatory molecules reaches all the various tissues and influence their physiology. It causes inflammation, which is called endotoxemia, and this endotoxemia is responsible for obesity. Obesity is responsible for production of more pro-inflammatory adipokines that in turn affects various organs like brain, etc. As a result, it leads to a condition called metabolic syndrome, where there is a high blood glucose levels, high triglycerides in the body, hypertension, and so on and so forth, which are the risk factors for development of type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular diseases. So at Nabi, what we are working, and especially my group is working on, is to understand how we can modulate the gut bacteria in a beneficial way by using various plant-based bioactives and nutraceuticals. So we are focusing on understanding these neglected crops, cereals. These are small cereals which are called millets, which are finger millet, which is popularly available in the market as ragi and kodo millet. And we have, in earlier studies, we have shown that they could beneficially modulate the gut bacteria. Whole grains of this millet can beneficially modulate the gut microbiota and that leads to reduction in the inflammation and healthy lipid profile, more HDL and less LDL, VLDL, and decreased oxidative stress are observed. So, and one of the active ingredient is in the finger millet is this arabinoxylan dietary fiber. This is a non-starch cell wall associated polysaccharide which is hydrolyzed by endoxylanases present in the gut bacteria. So European Food Safety Standards Authority approved 8 grams of wheat germ endosperm arabinoxylan if consumed can cause postprandial glycemic control. Why this molecule is important? Because arabinoxylan is considered as an emerging prebiotic because its structure is little bit similar to the lipopolysaccharide that is secreted by the gram-negative bacteria and which could interact with the toll receptor. When LPS interacts with the toll receptor, there is more production of the pro-inflammatory cytokines, while arabinoxylan, it can compete with LPS and binds with the toll receptor. It decreases the production of the inflammatory cytokines. So in this study, what we have done, we have extracted the arabinoxylans from the finger millet, and we have determined the composition of this arabinoxylan, and we saw it is majorly constituted with composed of arabinose and xylose. Xylose backbone is substituted by arabinose, and that could reduce inflammation in the macrophages when macrophages are treated with arabinoxylan and lipopolysaccharide simultaneously. So here you could see there is a more production of the nitric oxide, inducible nitric oxide, and similarly lipopolysaccharide also stimulates the production of more pro-inflammatory markers that are in the NF-kB pathway. When these arabinoxylans are treated with the LPS on the macrophages, you can see there is a reduction in this harmful cytokine expression by the macrophages. So with that study, we have also shown that these arabinoxylan supplementation in the high-fat diet-fed mice decrease the obesity and associated complications by improving the glucose homeostasis, improve deleterious lipid profiles, oxidative stress, inflammation. At the same time, it regulated the genes which inhibit the adipogenesis and beneficially modulate the gut microflora, where we have seen a prebiotic-like effect of this dietary fiber by stimulating the bifidobacteria. So these are the experimental model what we have used, and the diets we have given here. The animals are made fat by giving a high-fat diet, and prevention model, high-fat diet and this dietary fiber is given together, and all these effects what I mentioned here, you can see here, improve the reduce the body weight gain. You can see here, improve the glucose homeostasis. You see here, HFD had more glucose in the blood, and arabinoxylan treatment reduced the glucose in the serum. Also, we have shown that you can see here clearly, these are the, when you cut open the animals which are fed with high fat diet, you see a lot of fat accumulation here, and dose dependently you see there is a decreased or no fat accumulated in the abdomen of these animals which are fed with the arabinoxylan. At the intestinal level, you see here there is a lot of distortions in the ileum. You can see here the crypts and the villi size structures are completely altered. And I said that these arabinoxylans stimulate the gut bacteria. As you see here, firmicutes is more, when I mentioned in my earlier slide, the arabinoxylan treatment decreased the firmicutes level, improved the bacteroidetes level. At the same time, it promoted the beneficial bacteria such as lactobacillus, bifidobacterium, and roseburia in the serum. The most important aspect of it is that arabinoxylan supplementation improved the propionic acid production, and this propionic acid production is linked. Propionic acid reduces the cholesterol accumulation by suppressing the cholesterol metabolism in the liver, by inhibiting the hydroxymethylgluteryl-CoA in the rate limiting step in the cholesterol metabolism. As I said earlier, lipopolysaccharide, one of the harmful bacterial metabolites that are entered into the circulation, you see here, are high in high fat diet. When we have this arabinoxylan intervention, these bacterial molecules are reduced. So what we expect is that this reduction in LPS might have, through beneficial modulation of the bacteria, LPS is reduced, inflammation is reduced, and through production of propionic acid, the cholesterol levels are under control in these high fat diet fed mice. Similarly, you can see here the hormone derangements in the adipose tissue has been corrected. For example, leptin resistance, insulin resistance have all been rectified, and inflammation markers have been decreased. You see here, more red is more lipid accumulation in the liver of these animals, and less lipid indicates that there is no lipid accumulation, and this is achieved by arabinoxylan supplementation. So this is the benefit of arabinoxylans which are isolated from the millet. And we are also working on prebiotics, for example, isomalto oligosaccharides, which are one of the gut microbial modifiers. And we have seen an augmentation effect with the green tea extracts. When we gave co-supplementation of green tea extract and isomalto oligosaccharides in high fat induced obesity animals, you can see here it improves the gut bacteria by preventing gut dysbacteriosis. It also removes the LPS entering into the liver. And we have also shown through non-targeted metabolite analysis, certain agents which are responsible for obesity have been reduced. And central to that, there is a reduction in NF-κB pathway by down regulating the toll receptors that are present in this liver tissue. And also we are working in collaboration with our colleagues at NABI on the production of pectin oligosaccharides. We have shown that by differential treatment with trifluoroacetic acid, different grades of pectin oligosaccharides can be generated, and these oligosaccharides can prevent the inflammation as well as stimulate some of the commensal gut bacteria by means of prebiotic potential. And we are also working on probiotic strains that could reduce the inflammation. So inflammation is very, very important. Even in the recently, you saw that COVID and coronavirus also causes cytokine burst, where a lot of inflammatory cytokines can be are produced. So our agenda is like, can we reduce inflammation by using certain bacterial species? So we have shown some of the bacteria what we have isolated from humans can reduce the inflammation by curtailing the NF-κB and MAPK pathway, and these are the Western blot evidences for that. And we have also shown that some of these bacterial strains can even prevent this IBD kind of condition in an experimental model, dextrans sodium sulfate induced colitis. You can see here disease activity index is prevented, and harmful changes in the colon, for example, shortened colon size has been improved when we have this bacterium. Overall disease activity index is improved. And we have also, through metagenomic approach, we have shown that the gram-negative bacterial population, which is responsible for secretion of LPS, have been significantly inhibited. And we have also shown that these bacterial supplementation leads to production of important short-chain fatty acids such as acetic acid, butyric acid, and propionic acid, which might be play a beneficial role in immunomodulation. So we have also shown that how colon, this dextrans sodium sulfate alters the colon architecture. It completely destroyed the colon architecture by changing the crypts. There is a submucosal thickness increased. There are a lot of inflammatory infiltration. And besides this, there is a decrease in the goblet cells, which are responsible for mucin production. There is a neutrophil infiltration, submucosal thickness, which have all been reduced when we fed these mice with this bacteria along with the dextrans sodium sulfate. So these are all the preventive studies what we have done, which have also showed that the beneficially modulated the gene expression in the colon and protected from the colon inflammation. So this is the summary of what we have shown. This is the normal gut, good mucus levels, good diversity of the bacteria. Dextrans sodium sulfate reduces the mucus production, and the dysbiosis is there. A lot of LPS secreting bacteria is there. LPS goes into the circulation, communicates with the intestinal immune cells, and leads to the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines. And when these animals are pre-fed along with the DSS and these bacteria, it could prevent the loss in mucus, as well as it also achieved the eubiosis. Hence, the tight junction integrity is maintained, preventing the leakage of bacterial metabolites into the circulation. And these metabolites, when they are not there in the circulation, there is no pro-inflammatory cytokine production. And hence, we propose that these bacteria, through toll receptor, by MAPK pathway and NF-κB pathway, prevents the nuclear translocation of NF-κB, and then there is no production of pro-inflammatory cytokines, thus preventing the inflammation. So I will finish my talk here with the conclusions, based on my studies as well as from the literature. Nutraceuticals and functional foods offer a great potential for improving the human health, especially in the opening remark. Dr. Naveen has mentioned that in the COVID times, nutraceuticals might play an important role, and people have to evaluate what are the immune boosters that are present, how they can regulate this inflammation that is associated with COVID and boost the immune system. For COVID, immune boosting is playing an important role. So nutraceuticals might help in a way to protect inflammation and help in immune boosting, which needs of studies. And nutrients different from medicinal compounds, but they're also taken from complex and changing mixtures as a part of total diet. We cannot compare this nutraceutical with the therapeutics, because therapeutics always in the low proportion they will cause the effect, but nutraceuticals majorly acts as a preventive aids. And evidences show that during the early stages of the disease, sustained lifestyle changes will also play an important role, because drug treatment might be costly and sometimes there may not be drug treatment available. And evidence-based research is what is most crucial and essential when one talks about the nutraceutical. Without this evidence-based research, we cannot do anything. Perfect translation to the industry cannot be achieved. So, so with this, I would like to end my talk, and I would like to thank AMI Chandigarh chapter, especially Dr. Prince Sharma, Professor Prince Sharma, Professor S.K. Soni, Professor Naveen Gupta for giving me this opportunity. And I would like to thank NABI and all the funding sources and my collaborators here across Punjab, as well as in some parts of India, and my external collaborators from Punjab University and NIPER, Mohali, for the work what I have presented today. They are playing a very important role and helping. Besides this, I have also had a good collaboration with Dr. Naveen Gupta. We have a good paper that has been recently published on how do we improve the micronutrients and all. So, and I would like to thank all my PhD students and my collaborator, Dr. Mahendra here, who is helping us in animal studies. So, and I would like to thank all of you for your patient listening, and it is open if anyone can ask the questions. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Kanti. I think you can take off your slide. You can stop sharing the screen.
Yes, sir.
Yes. If Dr. Soni is around, he can join.
Yeah, I am here. So it was a very informative lecture, and I'm sure this might have added to the knowledge of the listeners.
Thank you, sir.
So, Dr. Kanti, it was a good lecture. You have given a detailed account of this nutraceuticals, prebiotics and probiotics. So, lots of people have appreciated your lecture in the comments box. So, there are some questions also, lots of questions. I will like to take up the few. First of all, one of the questions which I wish to ask, when we, this is what I personally feel, when we talk about probiotics, prebiotics and nutraceuticals, what is the economics involved? I personally think apart from probiotics, all these prebiotics and nutraceuticals are quite costly. So I think that's why it is difficult to reach to the masses. What you think that what we are doing to reduce the cost? Let us say talk about oligosaccharides. So they are very costly and all that. So how we can reduce this how we can make it economically feasible?
Yes, sir, indeed, they are very costly. But at the same time, you see, there are one company for one oligosaccharide. For example, Galacto oligosaccharides. It is being produced by Friesland Company in Netherlands. Likewise, inulin or fructo oligosaccharides. It is produced by some company in again in the Europe. So what I mean to say is, yes, in the initial stage when you are discovering a method to make it oligosaccharides, it will be costly. But people have been running the industries using this. They design the technology in such a way that they reduce the cost of producing this. So what I feel is they are using a lot of recombinant production of the enzymes and so on and so forth, and that's how they could able to do, I think.
And then thank you. And then Dr. Deepak Rahi wished to ask is, to what extent these nutraceuticals or functional foods are helpful in the treatment of a particular body ailment? Are they help in the treatment also apart from the prophylactic and all that? That's what he wished.
These are basically prophylactics, sir. preventive, protective foods. So one cannot expect that this treatment, this eating the nutraceutical is the one which can cure. It is not like that. So even whatever nutraceutical we take and we advocate, we have to change our lifestyle. We have to follow healthy exercise patterns, whatever it is. If we do not improve our physical activity and thinking that only nutraceutical eating will decrease, so it will not do anything. It is a myth. So it is a synergistic activity and holistic approach we have to follow in order to get benefit from these nutraceuticals.
He's also asking that what is the status of using fungal-based nutraceuticals in this regard? That fungal nutraceuticals.
Fungus-based nutraceuticals are not existing at the moment for several reasons, because they have to be evaluated in immunocompromised models and all, but I don't know how many of the fungals are there. They are not there because once this fungus starts to grow, it just overgrows everywhere. So that may be the reason that fungal based nutraceuticals are not there, but yeast based are available.
Yeast based are available because as I know that Dr. Rahi is working a lot on fungal polysaccharides and all that. Just my personal query: do these polysaccharides, fungal polysaccharides, and all these, because fungus are known for these polysaccharides, they have some this pre or nutraceutical value and all that?
They will be, sir, because I know one company in Norway is producing beta glucan, fungal beta glucan.
Okay.
So it is possible. As a fungus, as an organism, you may not be able to take it as a nutraceutical, like what we take as a probiotic bacteria, but metabolites from the fungus can be taken as a nutraceutical. However, as I mentioned in my slides, that appropriate understanding of its safety, toxicity, and effects all need to be evaluated.
Right. So, Dr. Kanti, as lots of products have flooded the market these days about immunity boosting products and all that. So, as you mentioned that you're doing something on green tea also. So, I think all these products might be having something related to these nutraceuticals and all that.
Sir, it depends on the claims, health claims, like what kind of claims they are making. Just you prepare green tea, any tea extract, and say green tea and put it in the market. It is again one tea plus. So we have to really understand what kind of benefits are they giving.
So, Dr. Soni, if you wish to add something.
No, yeah, it is definitely the synergistic action of several of the nutraceutical which may be there in these foods. But it's not only the nutraceutical, as Dr. Kiran has said, the physical exercise is also very, very important.
That is most important.
Yeah.
आप डॉक्टर सोनी मेरी दुखती रग छेड़ रहे हैं. So I think Dr. Kanti has to do something for the obesity, so that people like me can get rid of this obesity without doing exercise. So anyway, so there are a lot more questions, Dr. Kanti. I think lots of viewers know you personally, and we might be sharing your number also. They can contact you personally. So
okay,
very thankful for this lecture. And in the end, I will like to propose a quick vote of thanks. I am thankful to, first of all, to Dr. Kanti, who agreed to give this lecture and give a whole account of his research work, which is actually a very practical part. I am thankful to Vice Chancellor Punjab University, under whose umbrella we are conducting this lecture series. I am thankful to Professor Soni for joining today. On Sunday, it is very difficult to pursue the people to join. So I am thankful to him. I am thankful to Professor Prince Sharma, President AMI Chandigarh Unit, and Professor Kusum Harjai, Chairperson Department of Microbiology, for giving all the support and conducting this lecture series smoothly. I am thankful to the faculty members of Department of Microbiology and all team members of AMI Chandigarh Unit, heads of different institutes, There is a long list, and I am happy to announce that we have about 32 institutes in our fold. So, and all the heads of all these institutes and various heads of the various departments are always available. They always contribute to this lecture series. So, I am thankful to all. So, before we disperse, I have to make an announcement. The next Saturday, we have lecture of Professor Sanjay Chibbar, who is a senior professor from Department of Microbiology, Punjab University, which is going to be a very interesting lecture. I hope all of you will, I rather request all of you to join and to enjoy his lecture. So thank you very much, Dr. Kanti and Dr. Soni. We disperse
Thank you,
for the
sir.
time.
Thank you very much.
So we disperse
And-
for the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, sir. Bye.
Bye.